Okay, so we have this problem.
Yeah,
amongst
the
us.
human condition is problematic. Yes, we live in an age of incredible abundance, incredible opportunity, but also increasingly high levels of despair. The burden and the gift of consciousness is a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Right. It gives us this immense capacity to create and to express ourselves and to do everything we've done. Look how far we've come. Look how fast we've gotten here. At the same time, it makes us uniquely aware that we are finite and we are limited. And I believe that the crisis of our age is a crisis of meaning. And I think that is the source of the high rates of despair and anxiety and depression and the high levels of medication. And we need an antidote to the human conundrum, I would say. And that looking for that antidote is what fuels my videos. That's why I do what I do. My videos are like sort of these verbal explorations of me trying to work through, my own, to sort of my preoccupation with making sense of things and finding a way forward. So that's the inspiration behind my work. Existential bummer, I guess, is the genesis of everything else. Everything else is in response to the existential bummer.
And it's an amazing way to unleash that creative potential through. So we say this is a crisis of meaning. It's a problem, and you're providing an antidote through shots of awe. What other antidotes do we have? How else can we explain this problem to make it more relatable to people about how to find the antidotes?
Yeah, so, well, one of the ways that I think we can, the diseases of depression and anxiety are both characterized by excessive rumination, right? Our inability to get out of our heads. Again, the burden of self-consciousness is that we're thinkers, but when thinking can also become oppressive, because in the face of death, we can be paralyzed to act, like to be fully naked and trembling before the cosmos is a scary thing. And so it can send us into these loops of despair, this excessive rumination and self-consciousness, which characterizes anxiety and depression. Anxiety is too much possibility, and I'm terrified, and I'm being torn apart, by fear. And depression is the walls are caving in, and I'm stuck in this small reality, and I can't transcend it, and so on and so forth. But both of them are characterized by excessive rumination and self-consciousness. And so one of the ways out is to get out of our heads. And this is where, for me, I discovered the power of flow states. So, for those of you who are not familiar with flow, there's a book written by a guy called Csikszentmihalyi called Beyond Boredom and Anxiety. And most of us oscillate, for the most part, between these two states of mind, boredom and or anxiety. And beyond these two, though, is a state of consciousness that many of us are familiar with, even though it tends to be fleeting and finite, but it's a state of consciousness that typically fills us with incredible joy and rhapsody, and this is a state of flow, also known as the runner's high, also known as being in the pocket, if you're a jazz musician, being in the zone, if you're an athlete. And Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheal, who are the founders of the Flow Genome Project, they describe flow as a state of consciousness in which you feel your best and you perform your best, right? So think about that, right? It's a state of mind in which you feel your very best, so you're blissed out, but also your levels of performance in whatever the task at hand is that triggered flow go through the roof. So if you're a writer, that's like when you completely lose yourself and 5 hours feels like 2 minutes and you wrote the best thing you've ever written in your life and you feel amazing and you're energized and you're pumped and it's like, give me some more of that. If you are a musician, it's when you go on some improvisational solo and you had an out-of-body experience. You were like in the audience watching yourself and you couldn't believe what you were doing. I certainly feel flow sometimes when I do my videos in that it just totally feels like, the word ecstasis means to be beside yourself, to be outside yourself, so it really does feel like you've moved out of your own way. It reminds me of the movie Black Swan. You guys seen that movie, Black Swan? Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful line where the choreographer is telling her, the only thing standing in your way is you. Yeah. That's a metaphor, right? But it's a metaphor saying the only thing standing in your way is the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is the inner critic, the inner Woody Allen that's constantly self-doubting everything and saying, it's all for nothing because we're all going to grow old and die one day. Or, it's all for nothing, you'll never make it. Or, it's all for nothing because you're not good enough. You quiet that, and then something else emerges. a more curious you, a more open you, a more present you, right? And people experience that as relief. They experience that as liberation. And it turns out that when you're in these states, pattern recognition goes up, lateral thinking goes up, risk-taking goes up. So you find yourself doing things in spite of yourself. And that's where all the good shit happens, right? Everything great begins at the edge of our comfort zone. Everything you want is on the other side of fear. I mean, these bumper stickers are there for a reason. And so, I came across, I had my own experiences of tapping into flow. It started probably in high school, where I consider myself very much an introvert, and I'm kind of, in certain situations I can be very shy, other situations I can be quite outgoing. But I stumbled upon certain triggers that would put me into this zone. And my thing has always been making videos. I used to make like short films with my brother when we were kids, and always making videos. I was obsessed with videos my whole life. And what I found was that when I entered what I came to know eventually as a flow state, it felt to me basically as I would describe it as just a poetic reverie, where I just like loosened up, and so it's like the loosening, the cognitive loosening, the mind loosening, basically shut down the part of the brain that was like second guessing. That was like, nah, I don't dance at parties, no way. There's this stiff, holding back part was pushed aside, and something else emerged. And it doesn't matter what triggers flow. Sometimes flow can be triggered from the adrenaline of being on stage. Sometimes flow can be triggered from the excitement of something that just beckons. Sometimes flow can be triggered from breathing exercises. Jazz musicians and freestyle rappers love using cannabis. Like we're in California. Whatever floats your boat, truly, but as long as it gets you there. And what I didn't know that it was called flow at the time, but what I did realize is that there was something ecstatic about feeling in that state of mind, because it provided such a relief from the incessant chatter that clearly I have to deal with. And so there was a feeling of grace and gratitude when I found relief from my rumination and my existential despair. And so then I decided that has to be what I build my life around. And eventually, through research and a lot of reading, I came to learn all about flow and the neurobiology of flow and the advances that are happening in the psychology, technology, neurobiology, and pharmacology of ecstatic flow states. There's an acronym to describe flow called STIR. Selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and richness. So when you're in flow, your sense of self vanishes. That's the inner critic. Your sense of time, how time is regulated in the brain, gets shut down. So time dilates, and the terror of the passing moment is no longer there. At least you're not aware of it. And finally, richness, information richness. You have access to more data because all the cul-de-sacs and error messages of the rumination are pushed aside. So that's all you have to remember. STIR. Selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and richness. And that's flow. And of course, whether it's a surfer, an athlete, a musician, people who build their lives around their flow report the highest levels of life satisfaction. So there's something to that, right? So it's like, if we start with the human condition and the existential bummer, and then we figure out, okay, how can we address this problem? Because, we're here, and we might as well do something with our lives. And so for me, it very quickly became, okay, these experiences of flow. And the art that came from the flow.
Yep.
Because on the other side, flow is, for me, every time I have flow, it's almost like a mystical experience. It's an experience of the divine, of the transcendent. I call it the aesthetic orgasm, Yeah. and then all the content that comes through is usually in response to an experience of such rapture that it demands a response. So if people are looking to be more creative in their life, I would say the question is not how to be more creative. The question is how to find so much ecstasy in whatever it is that gives you flow, and then in the afterglow, when you come down from that experience, you have so much creative output to share with the world that you won't know what to do with it. So there's a relationship between mood regulation and creativity, and so I say, flow has to do with mood regulation, has to do with like tapping into that ecstasy of the present moment, and then seeing what happens when you come out of that. Lots of creativity for me. So definitely flow, I would say, has been for me one of the antidotes to the human conundrum.
Yes.